Добрий день, вітаю всіх, greetings. My name is Anna Tanczak. I'm head of the programming committee at the Ukrainian Art Foundation. Very happy to see everyone today, especially new faces and young faces. So this series are contemporary Ukrainian diaspora literature, and today we have a presentation of a great book, Solomea Krushelnytska was the golden voice of the golden opera era in Europe and in Ukraine. And this book came out because of the, if you read the book, you will find this sentence here by the author. Why has her story largely been forgotten in the history of world music, while the memories of her male counterparts, such as tenors Enrico Caruso, Mattia Battistini, baritone Tifa Rufo, or bass Fyodor Shalyapin have been preserved? So this question will be answered today by the author, Andriy Semotiuk. And before we start, I would like just to introduce you to our performance. So Andriy Semotiuk is a member of the New York and California bars in the United States, Ontario, and BC in Canada. He's a former United Nations correspondent who writes for Forbes. He has written 3 books and lives in Toronto, where he practices US and Canadian immigration law. Then we have Olga Popova, who's a Ukrainian composer, pianist, and laureate of Ukrainian and international competitions, and Anna Tanczak, soprano. Anna is a 23-year-old Ukrainian-Canadian soprano who has been devoted to singing since the age of 5. Born in Toronto, she grew up surrounded by Ukrainian culture and has been deeply involved in the Ukrainian community of the Greater Toronto area. Anna has been a part of various ensembles and church choruses, as well as performed in countless events, including competitions, festivals, commemorations, and celebrations. She's a part of the Predivo ensemble of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of St. Dimitrios. This summer, she participated in the Ukrainian Art Song Project Summer Institute. Anna completed her Bachelor of Music and Classical Voice Performance at the University of Toronto, where she has furthered her knowledge and proficiency in a multitude of languages and genres. But before we give the microphone to the music, I would like to call Sonia-Sofiia Bodnar, who will present the author and the book. Sophia is a book blogger and a reporter for Ukrainian youth TV program KONTAKT Next Generation, and she was born probably with a book in hands because she loves reading, and she told me, and I keep repeating it, she's probably gonna kill me, that when she was a child and she was misbehaving, so her parents told her, if you're not gonna listen, we're not gonna get you a new book. So you can imagine how much she loves reading. И прошу, Софийка.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Culture is what sets us apart from others, representing our country and helping to preserve our national identity. Today, Ukraine celebrates the Day of Ukrainian Writing and Language. This highlights how significant the words and voice of our nation are. I think it's very symbolic that on this very day we are presenting a book about distinguished representative of our culture, Solomea Krushelnytska. I am delighted to welcome you to this presentation of Solomea, Star of Opera's Golden Age, authored by Andriy Semotiuk. Today's event is not only a celebration of a book, but a tribute to an extraordinary woman whose voice, courage, and dedication resonated worldwide. This book tells the story of Solomea Krushelnytska, a world-renowned Ukrainian opera singer whose life was filled with both immense artistic success and personal resilience. Born in Ukraine, Solomea quickly rose to become a leading soprano on the international stage at a time when few women pursued such heights, and even fewer from Eastern Europe. She was fluent in multiple languages and could sing operas by heart across languages and styles, a remarkable feat even by today's standards. Her journey is marked by many groundbreaking achievements. In 1904, she stepped in at La Scala in Milan to help revive Madame Butterfly after its initial failure. Working closely with Puccini, Solomea's performance transformed the opera into a global success. Today, Madame Butterfly remains one of the world's most beloved operas, and it would not have achieved that status without Solomea's dedication and artistry. Her voice captivated audiences across Europe, North Africa, and the Americas, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire opera lovers today. Yet her legacy goes beyond her performances. Solomea Krushelnytska was one of the first women in the world to own a car, a symbol of her independence and forward-thinking spirit. She traveled widely, connecting with some of the most celebrated artists and intellectuals of her time, like Ivan Franko and Arturo Toscanini. Her life was filled with courage and innovation, not only in her profession, but in her bold choices that challenged societal norms and opened doors for women and Ukrainian culture worldwide. As we delve into this book, we also recognize the dedication and passion that Andriy Semotiuk brings as its author. Andriy, a successful immigration lawyer with Ukrainian heritage, grew up hearing stories of Solomea from his family. His deep-rooted connection to Solomea's story, coupled with his skill in storytelling, makes this book much more than a biography. It is a tribute from one generation to another. In documenting her life, Andriy has given readers a powerful account of a woman who, despite obstacles, achieved greatness and brought honor to her Ukrainian heritage, even as she faced challenges imposed by the political tides of the 20th century. Solomea's life took a sharp turn later on, as she returned to Ukraine right before World War II began. Trapped behind the Iron Curtain for the rest of her life, she lost her freedom to perform internationally and her villa in Italy, a place that held precious memories and mementos of her incredibly successful career. But even in her final years, she remained resilient, holding close to her love for Ukraine and its cultural legacy. It is fitting that this story is now shared in both Ukrainian and English, bridging two worlds just as Solomea did in her own life. For many of us, her story is deeply resonant, as immigrants, as artists, as Ukrainians, or simply as individuals who believe in following a passion. Solomea's life reminds us of the importance of heritage, identity, and the courage it takes to pursue one's calling, regardless of the challenges. Please join me in welcoming the pianist Olga Popova and soprano Anna Tanczak, who will sing Un bel di vedremo from Madama Butterfly by Giacomo Puccini and Садок вишневий, Mykola Lysenko.
Включене.
Нема що говорити.
Ні, ви виключили.
Тест. Чути?
Так.
Нема що говорити. Чудово. It was beautiful, wasn't it? Can you hear all right?
Я перепрошую, одне питання тільки даруйте. І прохання. А чи можна було б українською мовою, принаймні двома мовами говорити? Можна таке чи ні? Я говорю про українську співачку, так. Добре.
Але є люди, що...
Ні, я не за того, я просто
Є,
кажу,
що
що
не
може
розуміють
бути.
українське тут.
Прошу?
Тут в нас є такі, що не розуміють.
Ні, я кажу, та давайте двома мовами, може б англійською,
We
українською.
have people in the audience who don't understand Ukrainian. That's why we were prepared to have it in Ukrainian, but now we have to do it in English. Okay, in English.
Я вам...
Я просто про українську співачку хотів бися двома мовами,
Я
принаймні.
розумію, і я
Дякую.
приймаю ваш коментар, і я допоможу вам зрозуміти, що є. The challenge is we have English speakers and Ukrainian speakers, so we're going to have to be bilingual a little bit here, but I think we can handle that. Frankly, I was moved very deeply by that performance. It was incredible. I also want to thank the people who organized this event, which is spectacular. With Anna, and I can't list everybody, especially our sponsors who have stepped up to make sure that we enjoy this day, this afternoon. I don't know where to start. I guess I'm going to start with this. There are two questions that we all face in life, philosophically speaking. First question, who am I? That's a deep question. That's not something you can just, answer right away. Second question, why am I here? Why am I here? But the most important is, who am I? And that takes a long time to answer. And this lady answered it her way. She answered it by becoming an opera star. And she dedicated her life to becoming the best in the world. And she became the best in the world. She was the top opera singer in the first decade of the 1900s. Top soprano. Now you'll hear more about her. But before we get into that, let me just share a thought about how that ties into culture and what was said in terms of the introduction here about the importance of culture. Today, right now, this moment is a sacred moment for the Ukrainian nation. There are people dying right now on the front in Ukraine, right now. And that's something that makes this meeting particularly significant. It's a declaration that Ukrainian culture matters and that we're going to share it with the world because it's beautiful. It's us, it's ours. But culture is not something out there. It's not these paintings. It's in here. It's us expressing ourselves through things like these paintings and that song that was, these songs that were just presented. We are culture. Ukraine is not some land way over there. Ukraine is here. Ukraine is here. And so here today, through this meeting, we're expressing our desire to grow and make our mark on the world, the mark that we deserve to make, particularly because the war and what the predictions are in terms of what's going to happen to our people are stark. And we have to do everything we can to ensure that our nation survives and that people like this star and the other great people who were Ukrainian and who are Ukrainian and who are performing in the arts and doing things in culture are known to the world outside. That aria that you heard, the second song that you heard, that aria, we as Ukrainians need to make that aria one of the most well-known arias in the world. Well-known in the world, because it means so much to her life and what she did and to us as a people, even though it's in Italian, it's not in Ukrainian, but it's significant. Для тих, що не зрозуміли, що я сказав, я говорю про культуру і важливість культури в міжнародному форумі, і що нищуть нашу культуру на Україні, що сьогодні, зараз, тепер люди вмирають в війні, і тому це є дуже важливе, щоб ми виступали і шанували нашу культуру, і через людей, так як Соломію, висвітлювали здобутки українського народу на міжнародному форумі. I'm throwing away my speech because I'm going to share something else. What I want to do today is just share my, why am I here? How did I get here? And why did I write this book about her? I wasn't born to write this book, or it seems I wasn't, but it seems like maybe I was. So I'm going to share how this all happened. It's not necessarily about her, but it's about my engagement with her legacy. First of all, I never met this lady. This is my great aunt, but I'll tell you the story. When I was in about grade 3, I came home one day in Edmonton for lunch, 12 o'clock lunch. I came home, my mother's there. She made lunch, and she opened the mail. And as she opened the mail, there was a letter. She opened it, and she said, "Oh, Tata Solomea pomерла. Oh, Aunt Solomea has died." That was the first time I ever heard of Aunt Solomea. later, I got more involved in her life, and I'd like to tell you more about that, but I need you to understand where we are in terms of our relationship. And for that purpose, I want to ask my daughter, Natalka, to help me with the videos. Natalka has done a film. It's going to be coming out shortly. These are, some of this is excerpts from her film, but first, the pictures, right? Okay. First. Okay, this is what it's all about for me now. This youngster on the left, these two pictures, this is Sophia, we're going to call her Solomea. Sophia, she's my granddaughter, our granddaughter. And this little guy is Adam, he's our grandson. Vnuki. It's all about passing on this legacy to that family. And I'll bet you in this audience today have youngsters, maybe children or grandchildren or nieces, nephews, who you have. And part of our role in life is to pass on our culture to those young people. This is an iconic picture of our family. So I'd like to share it with you and tell you a little bit about it. Like, I'm going into explaining how am I related to her right now. This is Solomea Krushelnytska, this one. This is my mother. This is my grandfather. This is my grandmother. This is Olena, my mother's sister, my aunt, and this is my uncle Lysenko. And the people in this picture are the Krushelnytsky family na Ukraini in the 1930s. It's an iconic picture in front of a sort of a dacha kind of a scenario where they gathered to take this picture. Okay, next one. This is the family, the direct descendants of Solomea today. It's a picture taken in, when was it? 1921.
2021.
2021, 100 years later. And baby son Natalka, that's me. And these are who are left from the Krushelnytska family, direct descendants. It's Dozho Vachkov and his son Orest and Markian, and this is Orest's wife Luba, and this is Milana Skorek. If you know the composer Skorek, that was his daughter. Okay, next slide. Oh, by the way, Orest, Malgut is name сьогодні. Це truly Malgut is name. Just to give you a sort of an assessment of the impact of what's happening on in Ukraine, Orest was supposed to be here with us today, but he was stopped because of the military situation and probably will be called up for service into the army. Thanks. That's Solomea, of course, another picture of her. That's it. Okay. Okay, so now you're going to see a little video about Solomea, just to fill in a few gaps, and then we'll come back. Go ahead.
Who was Solomea Krushelnytska? Solomea Krushelnytska was once hailed as the greatest dramatic soprano in the world at the turn of the 20th century, and is a legend in the world of opera to this day. Solomea came from humble beginnings in the region that is now Ternopil, Ukraine. She built a career that extended across the world, conquering 4 continents. Over the course of her career, Solomea sang at the greatest opera theaters, including La Scala in Milan, Palais Garnier in Paris, the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, and many others in Europe, North Africa, and in North and South America. Solomea was a versatile singer with a range that extended over 3 octaves. She spoke and sang in 8 languages and knew 60 operas by heart. repertoire included various styles and eras, and she employed innovative vocal techniques in her singing. She was trained in 2 vocal schools, Italian and German. At the invitation of Arturo Toscanini, Solomea played the lead roles in the Italian premieres of the operas Salome and Elettra at La Scala in Milan. She also premiered the lead roles in the operas Cecilia by T.M. Montefiore, Cassandra by Vignacchi, and Phaedra by I. Pizzetti. Solomea was fiercely independent, rethinking the role of women in society and breaking glass ceilings from one male-dominated environment to another. She believed in education and emancipation for women. She was also one of the first women to ever drive a car. Solomea was proud of her Ukrainian heritage, which she defended as a patriot in the face of different authoritarian regimes, including the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Nazi Germany, Tsarist Russia, and the Soviet Union. Solomea helped save Puccini's Madame Butterfly after its disastrous debut at La Scala. Solomea traveled in the social circles with some of the greatest and most creative minds of the early 20th century, from opera icons such as Giacomo Puccini, Arturo Toscanini, and Enrico Caruso, to Ukrainian thought leaders such as Ivan Franko, Lasio Korinka, and Mykola Pavlik. Her career spans several decades. Her voice inspired thousands throughout the world, and her legacy continues. The Lviv National Opera and Ballet Theatre is named in her honor. Streets in Ukraine and Italy are named after her. There are museums in her former homes in Bila and Lviv, Ukraine, that continue to educate future generations about the impact of her talent on the world. Even in the midst of a war, Ukraine took the time to celebrate the 150th Jubilee of Solomea's birth. The Ukrainian National Bank released a commemorative coin with her image, and a series of concerts were held in her honor, including a gala concert at the Lviv Opera and other concerts in Cremona, Bologna, and Brescia, Italy. Solomea showed the world the capability of Ukrainian talent and culture, and is treasured as the voice of Ukraine to this very day.
Okay. Дякую. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about how I learned about her, as you are learning, or you may already know her, my voyage to learning her and writing this book. I mentioned that the first time I heard about her was at lunch when I was home from school. Our family didn't talk much about her. I guess it was because of the war experience and escaping World War II and so on. There was some hardships there that I can mention later. But the next real significant time that I learned about her was when I was in high school. They put on the opera Madame Butterfly, and I went to see the opera. My mother encouraged me to go see it, but I wasn't quite aware of what role she played in the opera. As you heard, she pretty much rescued the opera from a disaster at La Scala. Briefly, я нічого про неї не знав, як був молодим, але в школі я пішов на оперу Madame Butterfly і там довідався трохи більше про нього, але наша родина багато про нього не говорила спочатку, як я був молодший. In the 1960s, I spent a year in Los Angeles. And at that time, her sister, my babcia, my grandmother, was in Los Angeles. My aunt, Olena, who I mentioned earlier, had brought her over from Europe to Los Angeles. And I spent a year with my grandmother. And that's when I started hearing more and more about Solomea, and I learned about their early lives. And I also watched as my uncle, Olena's husband, wrote letters defending Solomea from attacks that she was bourgeois, or that she was Polish, or that she was Italian, and so on, trying to get the record straight, or straightening out the thinking that people had about her. That was in the 1960s, the early 1960s. And following that, my mother encouraged me to travel with her to Ukraine, and when we did travel to Ukraine, we happened to come across the museum, the Solomea Krushelnytska museum, that was just opening up at the time that the Soviet Union was falling apart and glasnost was in effect. They opened the museum to honor Krushelnytska's legacy, and we appeared at that opening of that museum. And from that time on, the people at the museum, primarily women, encouraged me to take an interest in her life, and through subsequent visits to Ukraine and to the museum, they'd pass on books and so on, and the result was that I started taking an interest, and about 11 or 12 years ago, I started writing this book, and it came out not long ago, a year ago. So that's the story, or sort of connection, that I have in terms of how I got involved. I'd like to read a passage from the book that might be interesting to you. I've got a copy of it here. This passage deals with one moment in her life, and it illustrates or underlines how fickle life can be, and what little things can happen that can make such a big difference in a person's life. So what happened was, the family decided to sign her up for opera, for learning opera, at the Lviv Conservatory, Music Conservatory. And because of an error in terms of registration, I'm going to read what happened, so it's a little insight into her life. Antin, who was her brother, had submitted her documents for admission to the Music Conservatory, unknowingly missing the deadline. On the day of her arrival in Lviv, she went to the school with her father. It was not far from where they were staying. To cut down on expenses, they were lodging with Theodora's brother, this is her mother, who lived near St. George's Square, close to the school. Святого Юрія, ми мешкали близько Святого Юрія. Тоді, може, дехто з вас знає Святого Юрія у Львові, то ми там були. However, when they arrived at the conservatory office for the entrance examination, they could not find her name on the list. What happened next became a story shared by family members. Solomea looked at her father with disappointment, and that frightened him. They checked with the administration, but had no success. They were given the disheartening news that Solomea's application was submitted too late, and there was no way for her to be accepted for studies that year. Her father went to the registrar to try to sort things out, leaving Solomea standing in the long corridor of Skarbek Theater, where the conservatory was housed at the time. Solomea was on the verge of panic. Her application was late. What a fatal mistake, disaster. What was she going to do? She knew she was not going back to Bila, the village where she came from, even if it meant she had to find a job as a maid. As these thoughts churned through her head, the sounds of piano music drifted down from above, and she heard the clattering of heels running down the stairs. Then she heard someone singing. She listened more closely. It might have been on the second floor. As though in a dream, she ascended the wide stairs, following the source of the music. The voice led her to a door where it trailed off abruptly. It stopped. What was there behind the door? Just then the door opened. A young girl appeared, smiling and thanking a man who had accompanied her out. She called him Professor. They turned, and upon seeing Solomea, fell silent. The girl curtsied to the professor and walked away. The professor motioned toward the door and then amiably asked Solomea to enter the classroom. Almost automatically, Solomea entered the large room, which had a piano in the middle. She started to explain. But sir, the professor interrupted her. Not now. You will explain everything later. He took the music sheets that she was holding and sat down at the piano. Solomea started to explain again. But the professor tilted his head slightly to the left and stuck out his hand to stop her. Feeling her tension, he smiled at her and pointed to show her where to stand. Then he added, after you sing, please, let's start. He began playing the first piece. Solomea began to sing. Later, when she would tell the story, she would say that her voice had never sounded that free or that full. She sang an aria, a folk song, and an old lyrical song. The professor did not interrupt her. At the end, he stopped playing, put his hands on the piano, and asked her name. She replied, Krushelnytska, Solomea Krushelnytska. He then informed her that he wanted her to study in his class. Solomea was devastated and broke down in tears as she admitted that her application was late as she didn't have a letter of admission. However, Solomea had greatly impressed the professor. Her voice, her beauty, but most of all, the uncommon expression of her face. Her eyes cried tears, but her face was proud and defiant. He told her not to worry. He would see what he could do. Well, he did a lot. She enrolled in that school, and from there, after graduating, she performed in an opera to sort of display or sort of come out onto the world stage. And at that performance, there was a prominent opera star, Lysenko was her name, who saw her and through her professor got to meet Solomea. And she said to her, Solomea, you've got a beautiful voice, but you need more training. And to do that, you're going to have to go to Milan. Коротко, Соломія майже не дістала дозволення бути в школі, бо спізнили аплікацію. Але професор, не знаючи, що вона є спізнена, запросив її, щоб співати. Вона хотіла йому сказати, що вона не може, бо вона не є зареєстрована, але він не хотів слухати і послухав, і як почув, згодився її прийняти до школи. А тоді звідтам вона виступала в опері, і звідтам приїхала італійська славна артистка, яка їй сказала, що тобі треба їхати до Мілану, вчитися в Мілану. І вона поїхала до Мілану. Her parents decided to send her to Milan. The story carries on from there. She meets Puccini, who was at that time a rising composer, and who auditioned her for the opera Madama, and then took her under his wing, taught her, and from there she rose to fame, international fame. I think that's about enough time in terms of an introduction to her life, and as you've heard her music. I think now if there's anybody who would like to ask any questions or make comments, we'll be happy to hear what you have to say.
What was the professor's name?
Lysenko, Valery Lysenko.
Vysotsky.
Vocal.
Amazing. Андрію, розкажіть, прошу, як визрів цей задум написати цю книжку і де ви збирали матеріали про неї? От, наприклад, зокрема, цю історію, яку ви нам розказали.
Okay. The question is, where did the sort of impetus for writing the book come from, and where did the materials come from? For example, the material I read from. I talked about, from childhood being sort of involved in her life or being brought into her life. Як я перестав, то мені розповідали про її життя, і родина приохочувала мене вчитися про нього. Момент, коли я вирішив, the moment when I decided to write the book was, it was a peculiar moment. I had written a book about Roy Orbison, a stage play actually. For those who don't know who Roy Orbison is, he's a rock star. And I got stuck on one thing, and it was music rights. I couldn't get the rights to the music because the family didn't want to give them to me. So I couldn't put on this play. Then I started thinking, well, what kind of music is there where there are no copyright issues and things to worry about? And I realized, wait a minute, opera, old opera, is a place where that is something that you can do. So I started thinking, well, I should write something. What could I write about? Well, Solomea was an opera star, and that's what kind of pushed me into. Я написав книжку, написав п'єсу про такого Рой Орбісон, такого модерного співака, але не мав права, не міг дістати права на музику. І то мене штовхнуло в бік шукати за таким оповіданням, де нема проблеми щодо музики. І я почав думати, де би я міг таке знайти, на який якось прийшла на думку опера, і то мене поштовхнуло в ту сторону. Я тоді розпочав.
Did you do most of the research yourself, or did you have help in research, and where did you source a lot of the research?
There's over 100 people that contributed to the book, including editors, paid editors, and paid researchers. My wife was sitting back there, read this book, that's Hanya back there, right up against the wall. She read this book 15 times to correct and edit it. Моя жінка редагувала цю книжку 15 разів, читала її 15 разів, щоб поправляти її.
We should get her up.
Yeah. It's a lot up here. My daughter and I and her traveled all over the world to collect information about Krushelnytska from the opera theaters, for example, Buenos Aires, France, and Paris, and Milan, and well, in Ukraine as well. So we collected, and there's a museum in Review that has as a goal researching her life. They opened the museum up to me completely. I could get anything I wanted from the museum. And I got all the pictures and everything like that. So those are the principal places.
Is that museum in her apartment? Was that the?
Yes,
Yeah,
the one in her apartment in View. Yeah.
This book is written in English, right?
English and Ukrainian.
Oh, good. So people that don't speak English can read your book in Ukrainian.
Yes, yeah. По-українськи. Книжка є в українській мові і в англійській мові.
Маю питання про цю роботу. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about her portrait.
Okay. Там є при вході Діана Мельничук.
Мельниченко.
Мельниченко, вибач, жінка в капелюхі. Її тато намалював цю картину. Він був досить поважний мистець з України, приїхав до Канади і ще є. І він намалював цей портрет. І моя мама сподобала його і закупила від нього. Так що він є в нашій хаті, висить вдома там.
Your family connections with Solomea, how did that help to collect more material about her? did it have any impact that you are
Yeah.
actually a direct relative to this guy?
It had tremendous impact. I'll just give you one story about that. My aunt, when I was in Los Angeles for a year, and my grandmother was there, Teta Olena, one day she said to me, Андрію, чи ти знаєш, що тета Соломія співала перед царем Росії і співала українські народні пісні перед ним? Чи ти знаєш, що то означало, що вона по-українськи співала, як російський цар забороняв книжки і музику, і все українське? In English, my aunt, when I was in Los Angeles, I was about 14 years old. One day she pulled me off to the side and she said, Andriy, do you know that Aunt Solomea sang before the Tsar of Russia? And she sang Ukrainian folk songs before the Tsar? The guy who had forbidden the use of the Ukrainian language and publishing of books and music in Ukrainian? Like, that was pretty galling in terms of what she could do. And at that time I thought, no, but I didn't realize much about it. It was only later when I traveled to Shkabarnitsa, where the Tsar had his summer home, at the place where she sang, that it dawned on me, or it hit me, how significant an event that was, that she would have the courage to perform Ukrainian in front of the Tsar. And the Tsar, after the performance, called her back to talk to him. And he said to her, and by the way, they spoke in French between them. He said to her, what language was that you were singing? Якою мовою ти співала, цар говорить до неї? And she answers, in Ukrainian. And he goes, oh. And what is your background? Яка є твоя національність? Українка, Ukrainian. Oh, he says, my retinue didn't tell me this. But he was gracious enough to give her some jewelry as a thank you for coming and performing before the Tsar. And that's how they left.
Мені легко буде якось ставити, а не можу. На рахунок царя я тільки добавлю, що коли він запитав, якої ти національності, вона сказала, я русинка. Бо тоді не були, ми українці, ми були русинки. І він тоді, каже, але вони сподобали так, тому що вона сказала, що вона з Галичини і вона є русинка. Є в мене питання таке, розумієте, я, можливо, знайду відповідь у вашій книзі на це питання, так, але такі, скажу, таку вступну таку підготовку, скажімо, що такі люди, як Соломія, це є, як кажуть, не від світу цього, так? Вона повністю себе віддала співу, і вона стала, так сказати, репрезентувала Україну як найкраще. Але вона не мала сім'ї, фактично, вона не мала сім'ї, хоч їй пропонували руку і наші Коневський, Попович, і Павлик, і Стефаник, Василь і так далі. Вона всім відмовила. І по суті в неї не було сім'ї, бо не було і дітей. Шевченка теж не було сім'ї, але я хотів привести між нею і Сковородою. Бо Сковорода втік з-під вінця, і в нього теж не було сім'ї. Але коли жив Сковорода, тоді були події, такі як Гайдамацький рух, Колідівщина, і він ні слова не згадав про Гонту і про Залізняка. Тоді звинували Запорізьку Січ в 1775 році, він помер в 1794 році, він не згадав ні слова. Тому в мене питання в такому плані, от про Соломію Крушельницьку. Вона жила в той час, як ми кажемо, коли були такі окупаційні режими, як польський, німецький, совєтський, так? Вже царський ми казали, так? І от мене таке цікавить, як вона, перше, ставилася до УПА, до Степана Бандери, до дивізії Галичина, розумієте, мені цікаво, які люди. І крім того, вона є дочка священника. Як християнка, тому що Сковорода був 100% християнин, однозначно. От як вона, як християнка, просто цікаво, як вона вела свій спосіб життя, як вона, скажімо, ходила до церкви і так далі. От мене от цікавить християнство і її ставлення до Бандери, до УПА, до дивізії.
Дякую. So the question is, first of all, he makes a note that there was no such thing as Ukrainian back at the time when she was performing to the Tsar. They were called the Rusene. So she answered the Lysenko, which was Ukrainian, but that was the word that was used at the time. I acknowledge that's true. But it was an insult anyway. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, well, that's all right, you know. I mean, that's not the thing to do to the Tsar. But anyway, then he goes on to ask about what was her, he talks about Skovoroda, who was a Ukrainian philosopher, and the fact that he missed commenting on certain important events in Skovoroda's life. And he wonders whether Solomea may or may not have commented at all about important events in her life, such as Oun, Bandera, Upa, and what was her SS, okay, and also loaded on, and also about Christianity, like what was her view of religion. Well, a person could write a PhD and answer to that question, but I'll give it a quick try. She was born in a home where the father was a priest, a Ukrainian Catholic priest. So she had a religious upbringing. Народилася в родині, батько був священником. So she had вона католичка була ніби з родини, як вона була виростала, то католицький religion. The religion was Ukrainian Catholic. As she grew older, I'm going to talk about the religion first, then I'll come to the political. She distanced herself from Bila, where the father was and so on, but not from her father, but from the sort of religious, what would we call that? The environment. Yeah. She was less inclined, and part of the reason was guys like Ivan Franko and Pavlik, who were socialists and who were, I wouldn't say anti-clerical, but they were less inclined to be conservative and the normal, you know, take the normal tack about women in the home with children and cooking in the kitchen. Because they were progressive, her father was progressive and she became progressive in that sense. Вона була прогресивна, не комуністка, не знаю, чи вона була навіть і соціалістка, але вона була прогресивна щодо жіночих справ, щодо політики, бо Іван Франко і Павлик на нього дуже впливали. And later in life, although she didn't have a family, later in life, she married a guy named Riccioni, Cesare Riccioni, who was a liberal and also a politician and the mayor of the town of Viareggio, which was on the ocean in the western side of Italy. And because he was sort of a progressive in the sense of also a feminist, also reluctant in terms of the church and the role it was playing in Italy, I think she moved away from the Catholic Church. Вона поженилася з таким Ричіоні, він був ніби ліберал, дивився скептично на католицьку церкву в Італії, так що він вплинув на нього. And finally, she married this Riccioni in Argentina in 1910. And for 20 years, she lived with him in Italy. So during that time period, I would say she was not religious in the sense of going to church every Sunday, etc. Вона не була релігійна, ніби що до церкви ходячи щонеділі. Але при кінці її життя тяжко сказати, чи вона померла із, ніби, скажімо, наприклад, я питався людей у Львові, чи був священник, як поховали її. Не був, бо тоді був Радянський Союз, не було священників. there was no priest that buried her, or there was no ceremony like that. However, it's my view that she was spiritually Christian and believed in God, although she did at times say she was wondering, is there an afterlife? So, as best I can give you, найліпше, що я можу сказати, є, що я вважаю, що вона була духовно вірна, але не ходила до церкви так, як... Але в Радянському Союзі ніхто не ходив до церкви, хіба під землею. In the Soviet Union, nobody went to church, so there were no Catholic churches. So that's the answer on the religion. On the politics, she was in line with Franco and Pavlik, who were socialists, but Ukrainian nationally conscious socialists. And like Ivan Franko, there's nobody more Ukrainian than Ivan Franko. So I think that she was pretty Ukrainian and nationally speaking Ukrainian. I would describe her politically as socialist, Ukrainian patriot, but Democrat. Democratic, socialist, Ukrainian patriot, but not necessarily what that means in Western terms. In other words, a good person from a democracy point of view. Finally, what were her views about Olga Bandera and everybody else? I can't help but feel, this is from my grandmother and from my aunt and so on. They weren't Banderiucci, but they were all patriotic. They respected Bandera, they respected OUN, UPA, they respected all of it, they supported it. But I don't think they supported terrorism as such, meaning Bandera's assassination of, the Polski, whatever, or the guy in the Soviet embassy in view, or consulate in view. I'm not Piratsky and the assassinations of people like Piratsky. I'm not sure they would be supportive of that kind of thing. So I'm sorry, that's a long answer to a short or a long question. Зрозуміли, да?
Зрозумів, так.
Any more questions?
Але Бандера не був терористом.
Okay, добре.
My daughter wants to say a word.
I should also clarify by saying this, I have a degree in 20th century history, so I'm very well versed in this section as well. Unfortunately, my Ukrainian isn't as strong as my papa's, so but I just wanted to say this. The inherent skill that an artist has when you step into the role of living other people's lives is a practice of empathy. She lived her entire life with that being an extreme value of hers, because her whole job was to develop the life of a character or being or a person. So while she was raised with Catholic values in the Ukrainian church, she developed her own sense of value, and it led and started and ended with empathy. That was what she valued most above all. And I think it's a value that most artists share. You cannot develop a level of emotional truth without understanding compassion and kindness. So I know that I know it's important that we do share the fact that she came from a Ukrainian Catholic background, but the things that motivated her weren't necessarily from like a institutional religion or a spiritual place. It's she knew the best thing that she could do to express to others what she believed in was to lead with kindness and compassion. So I just wanted to add that.
That's a wonderful answer.
So, can I stand? Yeah.
Дякую.
Так, і ще останнє. Ми беремо автограф вас і вашої жінки, так розумієте.
Окей, то дякуємо.
А якщо можливо ще одне. Мені дуже цікаво. It's very interesting for me to know what made her go to Lviv in 1939 that changed her fate completely.
So, 1939, August, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is signed between Stalin and Hitler. She, having buried her husband in Lviv in 36, started
Lviv?
Lviv, sorry.
Italy.
In Viareggio, thank you, in Viareggio, forgive me, started sort of decluttering and decided she's going to go on a visit to her family like she always used to in Lviv. She locked up the villa, gave the keys to a neighbor, and took a train to go north. Now, one of the reasons why she was concerned is Mussolini was rising to power in Italy at the time. And she didn't want him to get onto her all her papers and everything and the correspondence. She's very concerned about him getting into any, because he was not very, I would say, art-friendly. For example, Toscanini, one day, this is a brief story that illustrates Mussolini. Mussolini came to a concert where Toscanini was conducting, and he insisted that Toscanini play the fascist anthem at the beginning of the concert, and Toscanini refused. And as the concert was about to begin, there was this commotion about the national anthem. And Toscanini broke his conductor's wand and marched off the stage. So there weren't friendly relations with Mussolini in the art world, and she was part of that art world. So one of the things was, it was very uncertain, but she decided she's going to go visit her family in Lviv. So she got on the train, went to the Carpate, and World War II broke out.
Okay, there's the last question from this lady.
Я хотіла запитати, коли вийде документальний фільм, який планувалося в вашій сім'ї? Дочка чи
Okay.
We're aiming for the spring of next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more question. No, it's thank you for this presentation. It's really deep and knowledgeable. Because of today's war in Ukraine, Russia positioned themselves as fighters for traditional value, and here and there you can hear some story that she was a different orientation. Just want you to mention this because the war right now is adding to this a lot, and if you can.
Definitely not interested in Russia, imperialism, anti-colonialism, anti-Tsarism, anti-Bolshevism, the whole works. They tried to take her, first they tried to ignore her deeper, from 52 when she died all the way to the 80s, there was hardly any mention of him. It's all about the Bolshoi theater and great Bolshoi, opera, etc., but not about anything to do with her. And then towards the 1980s, they opened this museum that we're talking about. And from that time on, then they were trying to take credit for her as, she was a Russian.
Okay.
But it's not true. She wasn't a Russian. She was not a Bolshevik. She had nothing to do with Marxism and so on. Sorry.
Who instigated opening the museum?
Well, the museum was opened because her friends in Lviv decided, because of perestroika and what's the
Worst time. Glasnost still.
that it's now okay to open a museum for her. So her friends initiated the thing, and it caught on in Ukraine because cultura na Ukraine those channels of let's get reinstated here, and that's how they opened it. Дякую.
Дуже дякуємо всім. This is almost the end, but not the end yet. You are here for a surprise. First of all, I would like to thank our sponsors, which is Delta Bingo, Ukrainian Credit Union, and Ukrainian TV program KONTAKT. І зараз хочу запросити композитора Ольгу Попову. I would like to invite Olga Popova, who especially for this event wrote a tribute to Solomea Krushelnytska. Це Ольга Попова, композитор, спеціально на сьогодні написала музику трибут для Соломії Крушельницької, пам'яті Соломії Крушельницької. Прошу.
Technical difficulty going on with this.
So while we're waiting, I just wanted to say that you can also purchase the book in Ukrainian or in English, and you can get it signed. And I also would like to thank you, our viewers who watched us online. I believe today we had some viewers from Edmonton and from Ukraine, and probably Sophia's mom was watching from Ukraine as well, because we also try to publicize these events. We have KUNF has a YouTube channel where we keep all our recordings in archives, and if you like, you could subscribe and watch our previous events on the literature and concerts and also the exhibits. Thank you.
Можна запитання?
Oh,
Можна